You're not going to believe what Andrew Callaghan said. Andrew Callaghan spills the beans.
I see no problem with that at all.
Okay, man, I just had to tell somebody. You're the first person I've told that. At the Million MAGA March, which is like the proto January 6th gathering, and dudes were trying to go live on Facebook and instantly getting their channels taken down.
Right.
So that's like their Tiananmen Square moment. You know what I mean? Where they're like, we must be telling the truth because they are removing our shit from the internet. All these late night TV shows basically being like anti-Trump programming, that's reaching the living rooms of a lot of Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So imagine your Facebook's taken away, you turn on the TV and it's Jimmy Kimmel being like, and the orange asshole said this today. You're like, everything is fucking against him. Like, this is crazy. And that's the thing is like, some liberals are so annoying that you become a conservative just by sheer, just by that. Because you're like, God, I don't want to be whatever that guy is, bro.
Whatever they are, I'm the opposite.
Yeah. No, but like real shit. And I've never said this on a podcast. Well, 1 week after getting canceled.
Welcome to Doomscroll. I'm your host, Joshua Citarella. My guest is Andrew Callaghan, a filmmaker, a documentarian, and the host of Channel 5. You mentioned at the beginning of the film that you had a why that you wanted to answer from your previous work, This Place Rules.
Yeah.
Tell me about this why that you were
the
trying
why
to
is
answer.
kind of like the pipeline between like how does a regular, otherwise normal person fall like really deep down the, in particular, conservative QAnon rabbit hole to the point where it like takes full control of their life and alienates them from their family. And I think I looked for easy solutions with the HBO thing. Like, oh, they're consuming this media source, or they're buying t-shirts from Enrique Tarrio, and they're like, wrapped up in this economy or in information economy too.
Yeah.
But I think that what I learned through Kelly is that a lot of times like a traumatic family situation or like a chaotic or catastrophic economic event oftentimes precedes that jump. So with Kelly, like he lost his home shortly after the financial crisis because he took a loan from a guy who then seized the home as an asset when he couldn't pay back this $100K loan. And then for 3 or 4 years, his life was a revenge quest against this lender named Bill. And then that kind of doesn't work. Trump comes around and presents this like good versus evil spiritual warfare framework, and he was able to blend his personal tragedy and vendetta with like a grander spiritual one.
One of the things that I really appreciated about the early part of the film is that you propose, I think you call it Andrew's theory of radicalization.
Yeah.
What is Andrew's theory of radicalization?
Well, I mean, okay, so I said this and I thought I was like kind of a genius when I thought about it, but then, so my theory was that the 3 core needs are security, significance, and connection.
Right.
Turns out there's actually a guy named Maslow who said something very similar, and it's called the hierarchy of needs.
Right.
I think it's like the first like course you take in college. So
And
everyone's
just
like, this guy's biting
for people
Maslow.
who haven't heard of that, what Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
I don't even know.
Oh.
I mean, as soon as I said this is my theory, everyone's like, bro, nice try. You just ripped off Maslow. And then I'm like, what? I don't even know if he's alive, but if you're watching, my bad. I didn't even know about that. Anyways, this all goes back to like the Flat Earth Conference back in 2019, which is like my first kind of like right-wing conspiracy event. And I know those are pretty typically overused buzzwords, but it's fair to call the Flat Earth a conspiracy as opposed to like a disclosure movement.
Sure.
Would you say?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right. I want to make sure I'm not punching down.
I was debating whether I wanted to make a shithead joke.
No. So when I was there, I'd like interview flat earthers, and like everybody that I talked to, most of the people in the comment section of the video, I'd be like, oh my God, this is my uncle. He hasn't been the same since that workplace accident. Or like, this is my cousin. I haven't seen him in 4.5 years. Like he started smoking this high grade weed and the schizophrenic symptoms came in. Or there was always like some situation independent of politics and conspiracies that like came way before.
Right.
And I just kind of always had that in the back of my head, like knowing that, but I never really had a chance to prove it or kind of see that theory out until I met Kelly at the White Lives Matter rally.
One of the reasons why I find this interesting, so I've spent the last few years interviewing young people who got politicized online. My own theory of radicalization, I think quite similar to yours. But this particular narrative has been, I would say, entirely absent from mainstream media. Yeah. Mainstream media seems to propose that because people are voicing opinions on the internet, that in itself is what radicalizes people, without any of these other contributing factors. So to spend a moment on this, security, can we dive a little bit deeper into that one? What does that mean?
So security is like typically like actual physical security, like having a place to stay, having a roof over your head. Yeah. Typically it means like the home, like just knowing that like when things hit the fan, you're going to have a place to lay your head at the end of the night. It could also be like security in marriage, like that you have a faithful partner, emotional security. So I look at that as like mostly like a shelter and emotional safety thing.
Yeah.
Significance, which you have a podcast. I'm a documentary filmmaker too. For us, I think that's found in like the work that we do.
You feel purpose in the work.
Significance, like I work and I know that like I matter to at least my friends, my family. Whether or not you have fans, it doesn't matter. You can find significance in like doing charity work. But I think for most
being a
people,
parent,
right?
For a lot of people,
but for most people, it's in line with like who they are in the world. So for Kelly, his significance was like, dude, I'm a sick ass lawyer. I'm a high paid bankruptcy attorney. I'm the man. Like I help people. I win cases. Yeah. And then connection is like the most core emotional need. And I think it's the hardest to get because money can't buy it. So in that sense, it's very separate from the first two. And connection asks like, am I loved? Do people love me? Like, is there this, am I actually connected to my, friends, family? So like brotherhood, camaraderie, sisterhood, like having a family dynamic, sibling, all that is connection.
Yeah.
And money can't buy that. Like, some of the people with the most security and significance have the least amount of connection. So I've heard like billionaires having like high rates of depression and loneliness and isolation, and that kind of all tracks.
Which of these contributing factors, security, significance, connection, do you think is the most important?
I would say it depends how big your pride and ego complex is. I think that for people who lose significance, who have a lot of like, pride and self-mythology of themselves as like this alpha king of the world, I think that can lead to a lot of like a political psychosis in some people. Generally though, I would say that connection, the collapse of core connection, especially with your family and community, is what causes all radicalization. I think that, when Kelly lost his house, everything else kind of went under too. He lost his law license, so that was significance. His family had to, go from living in like a cul-de-sac, 3-story like McMansion basically to
it's a pretty fancy house.
To living in like Section 8 housing.
Wow,
in Anaheim.
That's a pretty steep drop.
And so I think that he had like a fundamental obligation to provide for them, and when he couldn't do that, I just think he felt like the fabric of like society was almost breaking down. Because I didn't mention this in the film, but Kelly achieved what is considered to be the American dream, which is class mobility.
Yeah.
He was raised in a trailer park in, rural Ohio or Iowa or something like that, like a farm boy. And he was able to get into law school at Pepperdine, and he was able to somehow work his way up to being a member of like an elite circle. His neighbors were not people who grew up in the farms. They were all from Southern California, intergenerationally.
His neighbor
inherited.
was like the CEO of
Is that
Taco
his neighbor
Bell or
was
something?
the chief general counsel of Taco Bell.
Okay. Yeah.
Or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think that guy is from the farms of Iowa.
Right.
And so he was able to actually like do like the Reagan thing, like born poor, like I'm here. And for that to be taken away from him, he felt like the American dream, which was never really a thing, being stripped away from him meant that something was fundamentally like rotten with society as a whole. And so this really simple framework of like angels and demons, like just this nebulous force of evil that's out to rob the red-blooded, strong American patriot for everything they've worked for, molds well with what happened to him in his actual life.
Was he conservative leaning before that? Like to what degree would he be?
Certainly not to the degree of, approaching 70 Antifa dudes with 4 flags in hand yelling about Kobe Bryant. But I think that I'm sure like he was socially and fiscally conservative, like probably low taxes, like stop giving out food stamps kind of guy.
Small business kind of
like
politics.
Say what you want type of dude.
Yeah. I appreciated that you wanted to address this stuff at the top of the documentary. And I felt that it was something that I wanted to see addressed more in This Place Rules. And you intentionally took the time at the top of this new film, Dear Kelly, to like explore some of those themes. I think what is mostly not represented in the mainstream narrative of this is that the downward mobility of most people in society is a direct contributor to their radical politics.
Absolutely.
And it maybe matters less what people are saying on the internet. It matters more that there are being audiences driven to hear those messages and in some cases to seek them out, find a new narrative to explain the world. Do you think that Kelly is representative of most of the people at January 6th?
I think that a solid fraction of them. I mean, I would say around half. I mean, there is people who are rich that are motivated just by hatred.
Right.
I mean, it's not. I'm not going to pretend like every single person at the Capitol was some.
Yeah. What's the class composition of the rioters, basically? Right.
The rioters themselves, I would say, were predominantly working class, if not low income. But the organizers and the people who like kind of sent them into action and pumped them up and made a lot of money off them are almost all anarcho-capitalists, as you said. You know what I mean? They're just like, get it how you live, It doesn't matter what the product is you're selling. Like if people are buying it, it's good.
Yeah, leave it to the libertarians to profit off of every other faction. That's
Yeah.
Speaking of libertarians, when were you active on 4chan?
When I was in middle school, just trying to show my friends shit to freak them out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because dude, 4chan back in the day, when it was like half anonymous and like half Nazis, that shit was crazy, bro.
Right.
You know, because anonymous, if I'm not mistaken, was like the Occupy movement, those dudes. And then there was obviously like the hardcore like race science people. And that was when B was like really like a war zone. And that was when the Live Leak, that was the free internet time period. When like the internet was actually making people like a little bit smarter and more engaged. I think now it's doing the reverse. It's making people infinitely more hypnotized and less intelligent.
Yeah. So B, what kind of boards would you explore in that era?
I liked the music board. Moo was pretty good for finding like obscure music. I think I found like, it was like 2011. I was in like 6th grade and I found about Neon Indian. I don't know, just like some basic ass. The viewers will know, it's like some alternative shit.
Okay.
And I went to school and like...
It's a music band?
Yeah, it's a music band. And I've showed some fools at school and they're like, oh, this guy knows what's up.
Yeah.
So there was that, there was B, you know, that's the random board. And that was where like it all started.
It was kind of an interesting space. It was like having your own kind of meta community.
For sure.
But this like arc, we spent a lot of time talking about this on the podcast because my sense around when you're describing like Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, like 2011 4chan was like anti-establishment, bringing down the power, you know, very different than what it is now, I would say.
I think the same thing they did in the late 1960s with the FBI infiltrating like the greater left and all like just any kind of mobilization that was happening. I think that they did it in between Occupy and 2016. I think what they did is they tricked all of like the conservative leaning people into like billionaire worship. And I think they figured out how to pit the greater left against each other.
Yeah.
And that's why there's no left at all.
I feel like part of the problem with these things is that like it's so new and it's so recent and it's hard to have an objective view onto it. So if you were to say that 4chan on this board was like this at this time, there's someone else who is equally in that community and has a totally different experience of it. And so we're kind of like writing the history of it as we have these conversations.
That's kind of what I'm saying too. I could be totally wrong about the FBI having a counterintelligence program after Occupy. Could be wrong. I just don't think I am. But I don't want to make it seem like I have some information that's not out there, that I'm like waiting to drop. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if that's even true. It just sounds true.
Yeah. What about shit posting in those online communities? Like, did you encounter this kind of like hyperbole and political satire that now characterizes so much of our online life?
It was hyper sarcastic and like edgelordy back then. And it kind of blended into like a mainstream conservative speak. Like it's kind of hilarious to see like Elon is using like 7 to 8-year-old 4chan Nazi language. Like he's posting like Pepe the Frog shit and calling himself
Maximus,
whatever Maximus. I was like, bro, that's like the oldest shit. That was like from when I was a kid. You know what I mean? But he's like a stolen valor white supremacist. You know what I mean? It's like, fool. You know, not saying I respect the OG white supremacists, but at least I'm like, you are a Nazi.
That's he came in late. He's late to the game.
Which is whack. I mean, it's all whack, but he's more whack than the OG, you know, real racists.
Just trying it on like as an adult. Yeah. I mean, I interviewed, I don't know how many different like literal teenagers who had those politics like 8 years ago when that was like an edgy countercultural identity. And now a grown adult father of 12 or 13 is trying it for the first time. It's a little embarrassing.
Yeah, it is pretty embarrassing, especially the richest guy in the world. But I also got to be careful talking too much shit about Elon because his fans, they'll really bully the fuck out of you, man.
They'll assassinate you from a Starlink or some shit,
and they think I'm Jewish, too.
They do?
Yeah.
They think this about everybody.
Yeah, but I'm always getting, like, every time I say some shit about Elon, my Instagram DMs are always like, you fucking Jew piece of shit.
Have they seen his recent trip to Israel?
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put those things together so I can avoid that bullying situation.
When you were in middle school, you started to get into politics. I've heard you talk about a group called Seattle Solidarity.
Oh shit, you're doing a real deep cut right now.
This is what I want to hear about. Yeah.
This is a sick ass interview. They're not asking me this on iced coffee hour.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I think that means a lot in how our formative experiences in understanding the world. And I understand that this was not a especially political group in the way that there are radical extremist
I mean, I think
groups now.
Seattle Solidarity was like a proto black bloc political organization.
Yeah.
I mean, my friend Mads Jacobson, I met him in 7th grade. He was a busker at Pike Place, and he was an anarchist. And he gave me this book called AFAQ, Anarchists Frequently Asked Questions. And I became, for 8th and 9th grade, like a pretty...
It was a physical book.
Yeah, it was like 1,000 pages. And I also grew up next to a anarchist bookstore called Left Bank Books at Pike Place.
Wow.
So like I always was into like Emma Goldman and just all the stuff that Mads would give me. You know what I mean? And his brother was like one of the leaders of Seattle Solidarity.
Yeah.
So after the police murder of a Native American man named John T. Williams in Seattle, which happened a few blocks from my house when I was 12, I started marching with that group.
Yeah.
You know, I never like, we're all like the ninja block, but I was like, you know, I have some leftist roots as a young person.
Did you ever use a political label in these early years?
Probably anarchist, yeah.
Yeah.
It just sounded badass too.
It does sound badass.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about now?
No, I try not to, because no matter what, you can't win, you know? But, you know, it seems that a lot of people think that I'm like a leftist, which is true. Probably. You're a leftist.
I am, yeah. I mean,
well, I am
the
too.
question though is always like, what left? You know?
Yeah, that's what I'm
it's
saying.
like there's such a huge spectrum of like, are you deep green resistance? Are you an egoist communist? Are you a social democrat? Are you a whatever the fuck? Yeah, and so getting in the weeds on those things is sometimes...
Yeah, I really don't even classify my political ideologies. But because when I say I'm a leftist, sometimes I'll see some really cringy leftist shit and be like, I don't know.
Right,
but then I think about what I actually stand for and care about, and it would not be a conservative value structure. You have anarcho-capitalist viewership for this show?
I know we've got at least one.
I had a college professor named Walter Block, who's known as the
holy shit
godfather of anarcho-capitalism.
I know, yeah, wow. Okay. I've seen his lectures at the Mises Institute.
Yeah.
You studied under him?
Well, no, it's not like he's my sensei. I had one of his classes, but it was a prereq. He teaches undergrad courses.
Okay, yeah, no.
It wasn't like my mentor.
He taught your class.
Yeah.
With fucking Walter Block.
Yeah, and guess who Walter Block's, guess who his best friend was in high school?
Who?
Bernie Sanders.
Bro.
I swear to God.
What?
This is all real shit.
That's insane. You're fucking with me.
I swear to God, you can look this up. There's pictures of Bernie Sanders and Walter Block damn near holding hands when they're on the track team together over here in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And yeah, so Walter Block.
What did he teach you about?
Economics or some shit. It was.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I don't remember too much about the course.
Economics, though.
Yeah.
It's okay. And he's like, for people who are not familiar, he is like a, gold standard, like Austrian economist, like about as far down the libertarian spectrum as you can get.
Yeah,
what was the school that he taught at?
It was called Loyola University of New Orleans. So it's like a Jesuit school. It's not actually a religious school. It's a party school. It's next to Tulane.
Yeah, that's an interesting mix there of Jesuits, and then you have a, libertarian ANCAP professor.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he works there. I think he's tenured. I think they're big on keeping people
rid
around.
of him.
Yeah.
What was that? Tell me more about this class, actually. I really want to know.
I wish I could tell you. I had an attendance problem.
That's okay.
I was a freshman. It was my first semester. I was like in a new city and it wasn't the most entertaining class.
Yeah.
But then as I learned more, I saw Walter Block's name online. And I was like, dude, I know him.
Yeah, he's very influential in those circles.
He was a nice professor.
Yeah.
It was like an intro to economics course, though. I think he just taught it, probably part of his tenure.
Yeah.
He was teaching us basic stuff about here's supply side versus whatever.
Right. All of this. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. If
you want to look at the ultimate example of media brain rot, I think it would be live streamers.
Yeah.
People who consume media, people are now so lazy that they can't even consume media themselves. They have to watch someone else consume the news and filter it so they can understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to sort of go and go and go until there's the consumer's eighth on the line.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So this is interesting, right? Because we're in this crisis of legacy media. You don't trust the narratives that are being told to you. And you kind of need some trustworthy source to interpret the events of the world.
Yeah.
Right? To some degree, we both fulfill this role where look at things that are happening and then report back to people. But what are the criteria? What makes legitimacy and trust in the people that we find in social media? How does someone choose you versus I don't know, Kai Cenat or the next guy, for example? what makes you trust in a personality to interpret the world?
I think that one, a consistent track record of not lying to people, but I think two, the future of trust in media is people being more transparent about their biases. Part of the problem and the distrust with legacy media in general is that when you're in journalism school, when you're being trained as a formal journalist, they teach you that you are objective, that you're going to be a part of the fourth estate, and you're not supposed to feel any kind of way. You're supposed to be like the supreme bearer of truth telling. But the fact is, nobody is objective. Everybody is biased because they're conditioned by the way that they grew up. Like we're talking about with me growing up that way. If I grew up somewhere else and had a different set of circumstances, I might have a totally different political perspective. So the future isn't more objectivity. It's people just being transparent about their own biases and how they stand on things. Like I am a left-leaning person. I don't present myself as an unbiased person. I'm giving you my perspective, but it's inherently going to be modified by the way I've grown up and had experiences. Part of the distrust about legacy media is they would never tell you they were slanted.
No.
Bill O'Reilly's no spin zone. You know what I mean? Like Anderson Cooper 360. Like what bias? We're telling you how it is. And so it was like this double gaslighting vector chamber where people are like, what the fuck? You guys are biased. And that sort of realization that people came to is what created the pivot toward alt media. And even and now alt media is masquerading. Corporate media is now controlling our alt media. And I'm not just talking about Peter Thiel and shit. I'm talking about
he's funding this show, by the way.
I mean, didn't George Soros just buy Hot Ones?
Did he? What?
I'm not kidding. Look it up.
That's how he's enacting his political program onto people through fucking Hot Ones?
And check this out, bro.
You're not joking about that? That sounds fucking ridiculous.
Soros Media. They own Vice and they own Hot Ones.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you look into like all these big alt media, like Tucker Carlson's news network is called TCN.
Right.
And the slogan is corporate media is dead.
Right.
It's like,
who owns it?
If anyone's saying that out loud, they are the corporate media. You know what I mean? It's like, corporate media is dead, bro. Come over here. Says like the biggest Fox News propaganda pundit of our lifetime is now like, yo, dude, I'm just chilling right now. He has like a green screen with like a babbling brook with like, he has like hunting shit behind him. He's like, I'm in America, dude. I'm just out here podcasting with my friends. Here's my friend, Vladimir Putin. Here's my other friend, Trump. And we're just talking, bro. What's up? You want some Zen? And so dude's like, yeah, bro, Tucker's fucking cool as shit. And the legacy media sucks. They're figuring out how to cater their agenda to the new media consumption habits. And so you got to be extra careful. But most importantly, just tell people how you feel and be clear about your biases, and you'll develop audience trust from there, I think. And if you're just making a name for yourself as a journalist, you have no, or just content creator, and you don't have a following, like it is controversy and drama and negativity that will get you to the top, or at least help you get a following.
Right.
So of course there's more people invested in negative news than there is people like telling positive stories and having like, good conversations about the middle ground and humanity and shit. Like nobody wants to hear that stuff. Even if people do, like drama and negativity stimulates a different part of the brain than positive, productive conversations like this one.
Have you heard of this phenomena called audience capture? This is, so it happens to people who are, let's say, center right or center left, and then they get a group of like a certain audience that's following them, and their politics start to lean a little bit further towards the polls because they get this like feedback loop, which is one, just like positive affirmation from their audience, but then two, like it's a lot of financial gain if you get a little bit more extreme.
Absolutely.
Like the people who have extreme views are more willing to give and to support and so on. And so there's this kind of like drift or incentive structure towards the polls as well. I've been thinking about this in terms of content creators who have like shifted positions in the last few years. Like there's people who drift from left to right and right to left and all over. And then I was wondering about when you started producing content that was maybe not political before, like did you experience a development or evolution of your own belief system?
I mean, I've definitely fallen victim to audience capture before, just to be transparent. Like, I mean, definitely like I used to throw a lot more stones when I was younger.
Audience capture, even like political audience or
Yeah, like
social?
when I first started my career, like back during the all gas no breaks days, like I would always kind of like make people look, not always this, but I would make people look bad sometimes. You know, I'd interview someone and everyone would be like, "You're so crazy." And so it kind of gave me this like complex to like lean a little bit harder into that. Like, "Oh, bro, you just interviewed the furries. You should go interview Wooks. You should go do this." Like always like kind of people like loving when I just talk to like weirder and weirder people, to the point that I started feeling like shitty about it.
Well, I mean, there's a large degree of people online that just want to like gawk at a freak show.
And I felt like I was facilitating, I feel like I had like a whack pack, like freak show kind of circus moment. Midway through All Gas No Breaks, where I was like, all right, I'm just kind of harvesting these fringe personalities for the amusement of like anonymous gawkers online. And I just felt bad about that. And it kind of took me getting older and realizing like, does anybody in All Gas No Breaks actually like appreciate being part of this show for reasons that aren't just like, I'm famous online? Like, are they connecting with like the audience? How do they feel about, you know, being lampooned endlessly in the comment section?
Yeah.
Like I had a friend named Mr. Daddy, rest in peace. And, you know, every time I'd put him on my videos, you know, he was like this crazy Las Vegas, like mohawk,
I remember
fur coat wearing dude. And every time there'd be a video of him, and we're like, "Oh, cocaine's final boss." So just like shit like that. That's an example of someone, he's like, "I love cocaine. That's awesome." But for some people, like, you know, flat earthers, those kind of people, like it was an objectively embarrassing experience for them to be featured in All Gas No Breaks. I remember when I filmed a video called 4th of July in Marquette, Michigan, 2 of the people that I interviewed got fired. Just for like acting crazy in an All Gas No Breaks video.
Right.
And that's something that stuck with me. And I was like, okay, do those people cry? You know, like, are they genuinely, did I just like start a depressive chapter for someone?
Do they have kids?
You know what I mean? No, they didn't have, these are like college freshmen. I mean, they could, but generally I was like, did I just like bring in a really shitty chapter of their life? Did I just create negativity in their life? And is that worth the view count?
Right.
And I decided ultimately that it wasn't. And so I don't do anything like that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for people who are not familiar with this, there was an era of YouTube, this is many years ago now, where people would stage fake acid attacks and do prank videos that were like on the threshold of violence. That was, really dangerous incentives. And what they did was, you know, deplatform and demonetize that stuff because they realized that they created this really dangerous incentive structure that would cause harm in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you don't think about that stuff when you're in the field, especially when the people on camera are like stoked to be in the video.
Right.
But then you post the video and they're like, dude, I lost my job. You know, can you take this down? And I'm like, well, I got an advertiser who's like going to cut my paycheck if I don't take this down. And you're 22, you're trying to make a name for yourself. I'm not perfect, you know, but to me, it's about like what you do after that.
Yeah.
Like if you just continue being like, fuck you, homie, I'm all about my fucking content, then, you know, it's on you.
I mean, I never had this problem because everyone I interviewed was always anonymous. So I went at lengths to protect them, and it wasn't an issue. No one could get doxxed or lose their job. And, you know, in many cases, their kids, they don't have jobs, for example. But what you start to, I mean, I guess the question is that these are documents of people who exist in the world and hold these extreme beliefs, and they need to be made visible so that society can see itself reflected.
Yeah.
And then you have to make this kind of ethical editorial choice of like, to what significance is this to the rest of society that they need to see it, and what damage might that cause to the person? And that's an individual cost benefit at like every time on the cutting room floor. Like, how much damage will this cause to someone's life? How important is this story for society to see? That can be a very difficult choice sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that the Kelly documentary was like the first time that a family actually really wanted me to produce a documentary about them, and they were actually happy with the finished project.
You got incredible access on that.
Yeah. I mean, they're filming the intervention was not my idea. It was the daughter, Kaylee's idea.
Wow.
She was like, we feel like a lot of families have a father or a brother or someone in the family who's in a similar boat to Kelly, and that this is important to share because it's relatable. Whereas like the previous family that I had filmed for the HBO project called the Q family, the Spencer family, they sued HBO after that movie came out.
Yeah.
Because they were like, you know, we look ridiculous. You know, I was younger. I was like, whatever. This is important. This is journalism. But now I'm like, I don't feel bad about filming that family. However, like, I feel better about filming the Johnson family.
I mean, it's immensely difficult because the kids are so young as well.
In the, which family?
And the Q family.
Yeah. But I mean, like, still, I think that was part of why it was so, like, insane. It's like, this kid is 8 years old and he's, like, so well-versed in this encyclopedia of Q stuff. Like, holy shit, he's, like, spitting every, you know, piece of info. Every drop is flowing out, you know? That Q family scene probably, like, benefited that family for the positive. From what I've heard from even in a lawsuit, was that, like, they are no longer into the QAnon stuff.
Of the politicization experience, clearly in Kelly's life, there was this loss of the home and the job and so on. Was there anything similar to that for this family that caused them to go down the rabbit hole?
I actually have no idea. That's kind of what I was talking about with the why not being answered with the HBO project. I didn't really know what the Q family was like before,
right?
You know, that political psychosis they collectively experienced. Probably there was something. I guarantee you there was something. You know, I'm just not quite sure what it was.
There usually is something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Financial loss, job loss, like you know, divorce, something
because
like that.
Before you even get into any radical politics, like, you have to have this perception that, like, things are broken. And if things are going quite well for you and you hear all this, like, insane shit online, you're like, oh, it's not really something that's going to affect me.
Right. But then the problem is that there's less people for whom shit is going well.
Yeah.
So there's more people seeking out, like,
for example,
an explanation online.
If you read online, like, you hear that migrants got free phones, if you're having a good life, you're like, okay, what the fuck? I don't care. But if, like, you can't make rent and, like, your card is getting declined at the gas pump and, like, you're like looking at your phone and you're like, what the fuck? Like, it has you have to build on, like, angst that's already underlying. You can't just manifest outrage from nothing.
You mentioned the intervention in the Kelly scene, and he was one of the first people that reached out to you after your cancellation.
Right.
Did you feel a temptation in your own belief system to maybe rebrand as, like, a anti-cancel culture guy?
No, hell no, bruh. No, dude, that's, like, the worst thing you can do. No, but, like, real shit, and I've never said this on a podcast, well, 1 week after getting canceled, I got a job offer from InfoWars.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's, like, it's funny, like, people always say...
Good thing you didn't take it. They're not doing so well now.
Right? But people always say, like, when you get canceled, like, your career's over. No, it's the opportunity to begin a second career in, like, that sort of, like, free speech warrior space with, like, Russell Brand in them.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do that because I'm not aligned with them in the way they talk and think about things.
What kind of household did you grow up at? Was this a blue household, red household?
So I'm from Irish Philadelphian lineage. But yeah, I think my parents had a big progressive shift around the turn of the millennium. I don't think they were particularly political in general. I think my dad probably leaned more conservative when he was, like, younger. You know, he was in a fraternity and stuff like that at IUP in Western PA. And I think that the Iraq War was a big moment of radicalization for them.
Yeah.
I think that Inconvenient Truth documentary was a big moment too. I think that I think a lot of people, in the same way that, like, 9/11 made a lot of people join the army out of just as a reaction to that. I think the Iraq War and kind of Saddam not having any nuclear weapons made a lot of people who weren't particularly progressive be like, wait a second, this war is a lie? What's going on? And so they became very anti-Bush.
Yeah.
And I think that they also became vegetarians.
Oh, wow.
And so they had this, like, you know...
Is one connected to the other?
Yeah, there's a connection, I think.
Ethical commitment or something?
Yeah, they just, like, kind of... Also, they moved to Seattle. There's more of a climate for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of times people will, as a form of teenage rebellion, embrace the opposite politics of their parents. And so if their parents are progressive or blue-coated, they'll be a paleoconservative or something like that. And doesn't seem to be the case. It wasn't the case for me either. But
they're blue-coated in, like, the East Coast, like, rough and tumble way.
I see.
Like, you know what I mean? They're very tolerant. They don't infantilize marginalized groups like a lot of the West Coast liberals do.
Yeah.
You know, my parents weren't some, like, you know, BLM yard sign type of people. They were just like, they would see someone who was not white or whatever and treat them normally.
Right. Yeah. Not
there
like
was no, like, hi, are you
something.
okay? You know, can I walk you to the bus? I don't want you to get shot.
What were these people called? Like the human body shield people?
I need to put this documentary out. So I filmed a training camp in Portland, Oregon in 2020 for a group of people that were identifying as white body shields.
Okay.
And so they would dress in their Antifa armor, you know, like the baseball helmets and all that shit, bulletproof vests, walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
And they would go to black neighborhoods in Northeast Portland and Gresham, and they would ask black Americans if they could walk them home from the bus to the grocery store, you know, and they would say, because if a cop tries to shoot you, I'm gonna use my body to shield you from that bullet, and I'm gonna take the bullet for you.
They're just going up to random people on the street and ask them, going to the grocery store? How'd that work out?
Most people were like, I'm good, man. I don't want to walk around with you. I'm probably more likely to have a problem with a police officer if I'm with this fucking white ninja looking fool, you know, who's like next to me with a walkie-talkie, dressed like he's about to go boost fucking MacBooks in San Francisco. You know, they're literally dressed like they're bippers, which, you know. So yeah, it was just funny. Like moments like that, you could never find somebody like that on the East Coast.
Right.
It would just be impossible to cultivate someone that naive if they grew up in New York City or Philadelphia. You have to be like from somewhere like Seattle and Portland. So do you think in a way, like a lot of very privileged people focus so much on electoral politics instead of like more local politics because they just kind of feel like it's easier to get mad about this like nebulous kind of bigger picture thing instead of like focusing on tangibly changing the community around them?
I think the liberals that really care about the electoral politics, it's more of a, they can avoid having any of the policy discussions and just focus on the binary of the choice.
Yeah.
Because if the conversation is limited to just this person is preferable to that, you don't have to talk about any of the like miserable neoliberal shit that they're going to advance. And so it's just like, oh, sidestep that one. It's like, you have to vote. You have to vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, that makes me think, like looking back at like Jill Stein and some of the Green Party stuff. Do you think like some of that shit was like either foreign meddling or some kind of like direct plan to subvert Democratic votes, or do you think it was like a genuine disillusionment with the two-party system?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past basically, I mean, I think my base level understanding is that like every superpower state is manipulating the politics of every other state, right? Like, and often when you trace these things back years later, you'll find some like exit group or secessionist group was actually being funded by the superpower competition of like US, China, Russia, wherever it happens to be. I don't get a tremendous amount of that feeling from the Green Party and Jill Stein specifically.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if that was the case with like a whole bunch of other smaller groups. Like there was this, do you remember Black Hammer?
It was, oh my God, yo.
Yeah.
They're connected to the Uhuru movement.
Yes. Oh yeah, totally. It's the same guy, right?
What's the name of that guy, dude? Yo, I wanted to interview him so bad, but he was like already like
I think he's responsible for a murder now, so it might be,
He's not a Zizian, right? Different thing.
No, different, a different thing.
Stay on track.
There's somebody that committed suicide in their headquarters a few years later, and he was out doing a fucking live stream, and he's like, this is the moment, Black Hammer's gonna blow up, like, just fucking insane. But so they did a protest in front of Facebook, like the big like sign in front of the thumbs up sign of their like one Facebook way or whatever. Turns out several years later that it was some group from the Kremlin that had paid for the plane flights to bring these black activist protesters in front of the Facebook sign to do the photo op essentially. So I think all of that kind of stuff exists. I'm kind of partial to Brianna Joy Gray's interpretation of this, which is that like, if a foreign actor says a true thing, I don't know, maybe like just confront the truth, even if it's difficult. I
just feel kind of dumb because like I never say who I voted for, but I did vote for Jill Stein. And this was my first time voting for like a third party candidate. And then like, because I was really affected by the Israel-Palestine situation, just as a, and I was also really affected by Bernie Sanders being disenfranchised in the 2016 primaries. So like, she came around, I interviewed her in Chicago, and I agreed with everything that she said about the war machine and kind of both candidates being controlled by this, same elite apparatus and, them being kind of like two in the same. And now Trump is elected and like, there's about to be some horrible shit happening. And bad things are already happening. And I'm like, wow, bro, am I just a total asshole and moron? But then I think about it and I'm like, okay, I am a Washington resident. My vote wouldn't have mattered. I voted my way in all different local elections.
Yeah, yeah. You weren't the margin for. Yeah.
But I just realized, like, dude, did we just get finessed? You know what I'm saying? Like, because all of my friends voted for Jill Stein too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're all like, fuck yeah. And she loses and she's gone.
Yeah.
No one's heard a word from her. We're like,
Right,
where's she's going? And the mass deportations are happening. And like Trump's talking about turning fucking Gaza into like a shitty resort hotel chain. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh no, it's happening. And like, we just got convinced that it was all going to be like the same no matter what.
Right.
Which isn't true. It wouldn't have been the same no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, my sense of it is that if you're in a, clearly blue district, like I'm not totally sold in the politics of third parties, but if you're in a really safely blue district, I don't see any problem with a vote of dissent. Just be like, this is unsatisfactory to me.
Yeah.
And you just tally it in the other direction as an indication that like, you can't depend on my vote. You have to earn it.
Yeah.
I see no problem with that at all.
Okay, man, I just had to tell somebody. You're the first person I've told that. Seriously.
That's okay. Well, now Putin, we can get the chopper, wrap him up.
Because I talked to her and I was like, she's a real one.
Yeah.
And I still think she is, but then I'm like, she only took from the Harris campaign and didn't take anything from Trump. And Trump won.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, even the margins for this are, I think in 2024, not a
but
big
like,
issue.
dude, Dearborn, Michigan voted for her.
Yeah.
That's the largest Arab American voting bloc in the U.S.
I mean, maybe they shouldn't have like overseen a fucking genocide for, it's
I agree with
kind
that.
of on them.
But it's, you know what I mean? But it's like, geez, dude. You know what I mean? Like, she really did pull a ton of votes away from, and I covered her extremely favorably.
Yeah.
Damn.
I mean, yeah, so we're in a pretty shitty situation now, obviously, right? I mean, I think the Trump administration is going to be disastrous. A lot of stuff is going to happen, economic reorganization, like basically selling off parts of the state, all this stuff. But I'm not totally sure that the discipline of having voted for Kamala and supported her and everything else, like, I feel like this is losing territory and is not comfortable for a lot of people to hear who would... Indisputably, a Kamala administration would have been better for the working class and for labor than a Trump administration.
Yeah.
No contest. But clearly, the people who go out to vote are just not going for her shit.
Yeah.
You know, there's like every margin, every demographic, every age cohort, except like white boomers are voting more red.
They love her, bro.
So yeah, there's something that's got to be changed. And I don't really understand like what the mechanism is to, kind of shift the Democratic Party back. The one thing that I do see kind of coming down the pipeline, and this is like a little bit of a large scale conversation, but we are at this pivotal point where something that more so resembles the political economic structure previous to neoliberalism, previous to the 1980s, we might see this kind of reshoring of industry, shoring up supply chains for green energy under the guise of national security states and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But that's going to be just fucking weird and brutal under Trump,
Things are going to get really bad.
Yeah.
I used to make fun of like, liberals who would like kind of have this like doomsday style prediction about a Trump presidency. It's like that kind of became popular amongst us leftists, to sort of like not punch down, but like laugh at people who were like, he's a fucking Nazi. We're like, yeah, right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But now I'm like, oh, geez, bro. I mean, if giving Trump a second term with how many supporters he has might not collectively in the long run be the worst thing ever, because he's not going to be able to run again, and the DNC is now a joke and will never be able to successfully run a campaign. So imagine a progressive election with no DNC. That's about to happen in 2028. No one's going to let anybody from the Biden, Obama, Clinton dynasties have a fair shot. They don't want that anymore. They know that the youth doesn't fuck with it.
I hope you're right.
They gotta be. Because think about it, right?
Did you see this list on the Washington Post, though? It said, like, the prime candidates for 2028, and Kamala Harris is 2.
No way.
Like,
who's
come
number 1?
on. I don't remember. There was, like, 12 different people. I just remember her being high up on the list.
Because the big-time Kamala riders are, like, almost as old as, like, the Trump boomers.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, most people our age and younger, they don't even, like, a lot of them like Trump, but almost none of them fuck with like Biden and Harris.
What do you think about like this demographic shift? A lot of older people liking Kamala. Is there some sense of like a right-wing counterculture now among young people?
Some sense of it. Austin, Texas. It's popping off.
Yeah?
right-wing, dude, it's like a whole thing. You know this.
I know they had the Urbit assembly there, I believe.
No, dude, like the post Los Angeles, like free speech, like
oh yes, these
crowd.
guys.
That's like a whole thing, dude. That's
they
like
got
a whole
the Free
thing.
Speech University and so on, right?
I just think a lot of these cities that are emerging as like the new frontiers of like young people who want something different, Austin, Nashville, places like that.
Yeah,
it is totally a conservative counterculture, at least in their mind.
right.
You know, in the way that they don't police language, stuff like that. You know, that's what the conservative counterculture is.
Yeah.
Is like saying what you want and not being worried about like, you know, saying a retard or something.
Right, right. Is there some degree to which it does in fact feel countercultural now? I mean, progressive hegemony in media, like if you're watching Netflix and Hollywood movies, like it is in some way an appealing identity.
Well, 2020, I think, led to a lot of that. Because when you had the social media platforms actively removing people for misinformation and deleting their entire Facebook page with no warning for like saying shit about the vaccine being, you know, having side effects. That is the man.
I was going to make a joke, but I don't want this channel to get deleted.
That is the man, though. Like, Facebook is the man. If they're taking you down, if they're taking your shit down, like, that is literally like the system. Yeah. So, like, if you're like, fuck Facebook, that's a rage against the machine moment for a lot of those people. You know what I mean? They're trying to go live. I remember being like at the Million MAGA March, which is like the proto January 6th gathering. And dudes are trying to go live on Facebook and instantly getting their channels taken down.
Right.
So that's like their Tiananmen Square moment. You know what I mean? Where they're like, we must be telling the truth because they are removing our shit from the internet. So they have this perception of like, because there is this whole thing of like truth tellers being silenced. That is like the backbone of counterculture.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, so they had like a late 60s vibe going on in the Trump world, you know what I mean? Because they're like, and censorship absolutely was the #1 thing that created that complex.
Yeah.
And just like TV being politicized, because a lot of people don't really use the internet and they're just on cable TV.
Or?
No, comedy. SNL, Kimmel, Colbert, Fallon, all these late night TV shows basically being like anti-Trump programming. That's reaching the living rooms of a lot of Trump supporters. So imagine your Facebook's taken away, you turn on the TV and it's Jimmy Kimmel being like, and the orange asshole said this today. You're like, everything is fucking against him. Like, this is crazy. He's the man. The thing is, there's just two deep states. There's his deep state, then the other one. So there's two rival sort of enterprises happening at one time. But Trump's deep state and his sort of my favorite era of Trump was his like canceled era. Like
canceled era.
Yeah, dude.
What, you mean being deplatformed?
No, like after January 6th when he got deplatformed and he was like hanging out with like Mike Lindell from My Pillow. He was just kicking it with anybody who was on his team. Like now Trump's trying to like uncancel him. He's like, you know, with Zuckerberg was like, what's up, bro?
They're all showing up to the inauguration.
But when Trump was doing bad, it was like him, Sidney Powell, Mike Lindell, General Flynn, just like these ultra rejects. And he's like, what's up, guys? And he kind of just like used them as like his sort of last resort to get the power back up so he could get back out there. That's the funniest Trump social era ever. Most people didn't see that because he wasn't on social media.
I signed up for Truth Social.
Okay,
I was like, I gotta get these updates. Yeah.
He did this tour called the Reawaken America tour with all of those dudes, like, you know, doctors who spoke out against COVID, like gym owners from New Jersey who refused to shut down. He had like this whole posse.
What are your feelings on deplatforming?
It doesn't work.
At all?
No.
So would you oppose it in every application?
No.
Or what's the line?
I put it like this, right? And I have the same argument and explanation for who I will cover and won't cover, right? So if you go pluck some controversial group from obscurity, like if I went down to the deep cuts of Southern California and made a video about like a clan group, like a white supremacist neo-Nazi lowrider gang.
Yeah.
And I made them famous, even in the vein of like, oh, I'm showing you like the underbelly of society.
Are you thinking about a real group right now?
Yes.
Okay.
That would inherently like amplify their profile.
You're going to Streisand effect there.
And it will lead to recruitment numbers by people who are like, I hate Andrew and he's making them look bad, so I want to be a part of them.
Yep.
But if there's people that are already well-known public figures, like Alex Jones, everybody knows who that is.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem in covering them. And deplatforming them will only cause their audience to move into a tighter echo chamber somewhere else, like Gab or Parler or Rumble.
Right.
Or BitChute. You know, so it doesn't work. Trump's in office. That's why, you know, it didn't work. It's kind of, you know, can tell you right there, it didn't work. They probably worked to stop like actual Nazi organizing. Like Charlottesville in 2017, we haven't seen anything like that. And if you look at the data on numbers of active Klansmen and white power people, it's way less.
There's, I mean, at a certain point, the state does get involved. And so those groups that are, dangerous and doing violence in the real world, like counterterrorism just kicks in their state resources for this stuff.
And I just hate the people who advocate for deplatforming, like they're so nauseating, bro. There's the way they talk about like problematic viewpoints and like the greater good and like their righteous hill. Like we should just like make the internet a safe place. Yeah, these people are so full of shit, bro. And that's the thing is like some liberals are so annoying that you become a conservative just by sheer, just by that. Because you're like, God, I don't want to be whatever that guy is, bro.
Whatever they are, I'm the opposite. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that some of those spokespeople claim to speak for us.
There's, I'm not going to have all these numbers off the top of my head, but there's an important study from the University of Cornell. Jeremy Blackburn, a few other researchers are involved in this, but they study the migration of two important groups from Reddit, the Donald.win and incels.is or IO, whatever the website was. But these two websites that form after the deplatforming of r/the Donald and r/incels, that you had this space in which people could participate in often radical, ugly politics, but then they could also be exposed to other ideas. And then when it gets deplatformed, now there's this second website that pops up, all of the people migrate over, and they measured what they called the toxicity, this was their term in the study, about how frequently, what that correlates to in the research study is that the frequency with which certain words are used, right? So hate speech, things, regrettable phrases, whatever one might say on these forums. And what they found was that the overall user base declined, in some cases significantly, by like 2/3 in some cases. But the indicators of toxicity, meaning how radical their politics were, increased enormously.
Bro, you got to send me that because that's something that I've seen.
I'll send it to you.
I've seen that in real life before.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that study exists because that is exactly what happens.
Right.
It might be less people, but the people that are there are 10 times more hardened.
More
they have
extreme.
An underdog complex. They have a chip on their shoulders, and they're more likely to do something crazy.
Yeah, you've just concentrated the most radical elements of that group, and now there's no dissenting voices or moderators. So the wager here, and this is where it gets kind of difficult, is like, is it more dangerous to have a large group of somewhat radical people or a small group of very radical people?
I would
and in
say,
different cases, I don't know.
I would say a small group of radical people.
More dangerous.
Yeah, how many members does Al-Qaeda have?
Right. So you have, lone wolf acts of terror and stuff like that.
I mean, dude, 100 people ready to go sicko mode versus 10,000 people who are like, I believe this, but I wouldn't act on it.
I'm gonna reshare this. Yeah.
And imagine if there was 100 Luigis.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a serious...
I mean, a lot of regime changes, and coups and shit are, sometimes the rebel faction is less than 1,000 people, but they're all on the same page.
Did you ever run into a problem of getting deplatformed, having videos taken down, having your political speech censored in any way?
I have had a lot of stuff taken down, but not that much stuff. I mean, I had like my anti-vax rally video taken down in 2020. I haven't dealt with too much censorship though.
Yeah.
No, not on an extreme degree. It's mostly because like I'm not a pundit. Like I go talk to other people.
Right.
So even when I talk to someone who's saying something that might go against like the terms of service for the social media platform, it's still kind of protected because it's like they're saying it, not me. If I was sitting in front of a news desk or behind a news desk with like a green screen behind me and I was like looking at the camera and I was like, this vaccine will kill you, I would have been taken down. But I can go to a rally and someone can scream that and the Channel 5 viewer understands that I'm not espousing that statement.
Yeah.
And I guess the problem is when you have these like really self-righteous liberals and they talk about, they talk down their nose, like you don't want to validate their perspective.
Yeah.
They would prefer these people don't exist, period.
They want to pretend in many cases that they don't.
And it's easy for them because a lot of them physically live in places where you're not going to find too many people like that. So it's kind of like keep them out of my way. And that's why so many people were shocked at the voting results. I wasn't shocked. I was like, have you guys been anywhere else,
Well, people don't spend time with in any like part of society that doesn't share their political beliefs. Like this kind of polarization like is also social. And so the idea that someone could believe differently than you is like really unheard of for a lot of people.
You know what I was thinking about, and I feel like you could speak to this, it's kind of a different subject, but like conservatives talk a lot about how they hate collectivism. and how they're these like radical individuals,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Right.
And then kind of you have on the left a lot of collectivism and a push away from like individual selfish thought patterns. But it seems like it's actually inverted when it comes to like the voting booth. Like,
how do you mean?
I've seen weed smoking, ayahuasca drinking, crypto libertarians who are standing next to like Christian fundamentalists who like hate gay people and think that weed was like literally created by Satan to like, you know, make white women like have interracial marriages and shit, you know, just like insane out there shit. And they're all like putting that stuff to the side with their MAGA hats on and their signs being like, we love Trump. Whereas like, I feel like as far as the left goes, you'd be hard pressed to get a group of 20 of them on the same page about something. You know what I mean? I just think that it's funny how like that's kind of been flipped on its head in recent times, where you have a hyper collectivist right wing posturing themselves as like individuals. On the left, you have like a hyper collectivist network of extremely self-obsessed individuals.
Yeah.
You know, and it seems like it's not something that's talked about. I was wondering if you've seen anything in your experience that
there's weird kind of like, collections, these kind of untenable coalitions of people. As a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, principally Gonzalez thought, I'm breaking bread with an anarchist right now, so we can overcome our differences. I'm not actually that. Those people are fucking insane. But there's something weird in like the MAGA coalition right now that I think we're starting to see break apart a little bit in this like nationalist right and tech right clash that seems to be happening. But there's Quinn Slobodian is a historian that we talked a few episodes ago. And his new book is about the merger of these like libertarian monetarist kind of like ANCAP types with like the nationalist like white supremacy types, because they have really opposed belief systems.
They almost have nothing in common.
I mean, the legitimacy of the state. Should we have borders? Do you want borders at all? Do you want a borderless free market society versus a wall? Like there's important disagreements, but they're in the same group. And those alliances are always weird. And
they've been
the
able
Democrats
to push
have similar things as well. It's not just the nationalist right. It's like
But
every coalition is
I think
weird.
with our generation, you're seeing, you know, more people who don't want to put differences aside. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I think the world changes too. The world changes too. So there's a few important examples for this. This is going to sound, it's a little bit elongated, but you know what? It's a fucking podcast. We can tell the story. In the 1920s, there's this group of young left-wing guys that meet in City College University in New York, and there's Alcove 1 and Alcove 2, and the, you know, young, bright intellectuals of the time kind of meet in these two places, and basically like the lobby, the community area of this college, and they're divided between the pro-Stalinist left and the anti-Stalinist left. So the kind of Trotskyites of that period, which were the kind of leading revolutionary intellectuals. There's a fantastic documentary that's made by PBS many years ago now called Arguing the World. And it follows the story of these people over the course of the 20th century, like 60 years, literally. And there's one person in particular, Irving Kristol, who becomes an advisor to the Reagan administration. So imagining the drift of those politics with a little bit of funding from the CIA and various points of influence, but watching the failures of Soviet communism and, you know, the unprecedented upward mobility of liberal democratic society in the post-war boom of America. You know, after World War II, you see people who grew up in tenement buildings and now they have a suburban home and a car and a yard.
One
and
kind
like,
of person.
This is, it worked for a larger segment of the population than it has ever worked for anywhere else. And for some of those people who had revolutionary left-wing politics, they're like, this is great. This is better. And so they were, in fact, like persuaded. But over that period of time, like they drifted in their political compass or political alignment, right? From this revolutionary left position to this kind of authoritarian right-wing position. And there's similar stories coming from the 1960s that are a little bit more compressed, where the kind of hippies who were out in the communes in California then came back to the Valley and became like the tech entrepreneurs. And one I associate as being left and the other now I associate as being right. But like history is changing around them. Their belief systems are changing around them. And so these people, you know, is it really that unbelievable that like we could be at a pivotal moment in history where like this drift is actually happening and realignment is actually happening and things don't make sense now for a reason because like well, you didn't just uncork this identity where it's like, oh, I am a Democratic and Federalist, and I was that way since I was 14, and I was carved into stone, and that's like my like identity. In the same way, like I stopped listening to music after high school, and those are just the bands that I like, and now I never you know, evolved or grew after that.
I think that also too, you're going to see more of that in the coming years, because I feel like the left is entering this really concessionary period, if that makes sense, where some of the programming of like conservative media, like making fun of social justice warriors and, you know, cancel culture and
Matt Walsh documentary
is kind of like
biggest doc of the year.
It's kind of embarrassing a lot of like liberals, even if they don't realize it, and leftists, to where they're now like kind of, they don't even realize it, but they're making concessions to make themselves more palatable to the way the mainstream is drifting right. So you have leftists being like, it's always funny when you have, I'm not going to say anyone's name in particular, but among the left, you have like people who are still in the bubble in Bushwick or one of these places where every single person is
the Imperial Core.
Yeah. And they're like, I'm really different from other people because like I'm gonna say like retard and like fag and shit. And it's like, newsflash, bro. Everybody says that everywhere else. You know what I mean? But they're like, I'm kind of like the wild card. It's like I'm about to walk in the building. It's like, my boy, you're just doing what everyone else does everywhere. You know, and it's just kind of funny how you're seeing you're even seeing leftists like positioning themselves as like, we're part of the post-left. Like this is like it's like, oh yeah, I'm so sure. What is it called? Dirtbag left? It's like, my boy, if you have a leftist podcast, newsflash. You're not like I don't think they know how many people are conservative. You know what I mean? Because in the country at large, like, dude, it's just crazy. I don't know, man. It just makes me laugh sometimes, like how far we've come as far as echo chambers tightening in the past 8 years, to where like you have, and that's an example of concessionary leftism now.
It's a very radical identity within the context of elite institutions that are all progressive. To be like the one person who's like, you know, a reactionary.
Like, but they're still within the system. And they don't even realize. And so like I have made sure to not do that, you know, because I understand that there's a growing demand of people, and those people are going to become hardcore conservatives.
Did you feel like, I'll get crucified for saying this, but like I felt like when I stepped outside of my, I guess what I would describe now as a kind of progressive elite education bubble, and I talked to people who didn't share like fundamental precepts of like the innate value of the individual, or like they thought like different races were like literally different species. Like people are just fucking insane. Like dinosaurs don't exist. You know, dragons are real, but dinosaurs don't exist. Like someone who totally doesn't understand your worldview.
Just out there.
What I think that did was kind of, it tempered me back towards like, not the center, I want to say, but within like a 10-year time frame of what I'm looking to do politically. You know, and before I would think I'd have these big utopian ideas of like, all right, we're going to do revolutionary communism or something like that.
Utopian is the key word.
Which I still think is important, but I realized actually how difficult that is to build a political consensus. And how like simple the platform actually needs to be. It's like, actually, whether this guy believes in dinosaurs or not, he still needs to go to the doctor. And so I can meet him at that level. You know, but that's kind of like the extent of, I guess it made me more like reasonable in my political views. Did you meet people that kind of shifted you
I
in
think
any
that
direction?
Whenever I moved into the RV and I spent so much time away from the coastal cities and in the heart of America for years, I just got so used to that. And I was like, most people are like that, and not like the people from where I'm from. And I think it was just coming back now to the cities and seeing that shift in like the new post-left shit is just hilarious, because like I said, those people are going to become conservative in a few years. And more importantly, like most people think that they're doing the right thing. Most people don't wake up and think like, I'm going to make life shitty for somebody else.
I'm going to do evil today.
Even the guy who tells you there's no dinosaurs, but there's dragons. Like he's trying to help you, dude. He's trying to like, in his mind, like he's doing what you think you're doing by talking about this shit about the doctor. You know what I mean? He's like, yo, dude, like, no, seriously, there was dragons. Like he wants you to know that because he believes that. You know, it's not just like, and so it's not so much, you know, the informed versus the misinformed. It's just, you know, different levels of upbringing, cultural values, and, you know, also education too. So I guess maybe it does have something to do with being informed. But a lot of people are very informed in their own echo chamber, but they're not getting real information too.
How much of this online chaos would you say is a result of the design of social media versus how much of it is just real political crisis independent of whatever media structure we have?
I think that the real political crisis sets the foundation for like the algorithm to harvest outrage and crossfire.
That's the right answer.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it would be crazy for me to say, and I feel like that's what This Place Rules suggested. They're like, everything's good, and fucking Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson are like making us freak out. No, there's actually serious problems.
Right.
It's just what the media tends to do is make sure that you don't arrive to the solution. Like make sure that you do not question why you are actually paying $5 for gas. Like, so like it's crazy. Like I was telling you about the drunk Philly football fan and him working for a consulting firm that had a DEI initiative that was introduced a couple years ago. That stuff actually works to get people like, you know, riled up about the wrong thing. It's actually insane how easy it is to get people off track when something happens. Like when Kelly was evicted from his home, that was possible because in America, if you have someone sign a contract for something that is outrageous, such as if you can't pay me back $100K after 4 years, I get your $2.5 million home because you wrote it down in the contract. There's contracts that you have, you know, basically are akin to indentured servitude. You know what I mean? But like there's basically sharecropping contracts where you're only working for room and board here in the US, especially for a lot of the migrants who are being paid under the table, right? That's pretty fucking crazy and fucked up.
What are your plans for the release of the film?
Well, I mean, we're going to keep it streaming independently for a while. The goal is to like at some point have a streaming service purchase it for like a year or two for them to put on their platform.
Okay.
But it's probably going to be hard to do that just based upon how hard it's been to get the press to pay attention to us thus far.
These are kind of unpopular topics to bring up.
Unpopular topics. And
legacy
also,
media channels.
We're getting sued over the movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so they don't want to be attached to a film that has an active lawsuit going on. Because then if we lose the lawsuit, and they're going to be liable as well. I think we're going to win the defamation suit, but still, like, they want that to be resolved way before they consider, you know, buying it for streaming.
Right.
So I think I have to settle the lawsuit, which might take like a year. But I think the movie might still be relevant in like a year. So we'll figure it out.
I mean, there's similar things that have happened to a lot of people, a lot of dads and uncles in the world. So, yeah, there will, I think, always be a demand for it. The one thing I've learned about this kind of material, this kind of world, it's not going anywhere. It's only getting more extreme.
Yeah.
If there's a young person watching now who's a fan of your content, is maybe around the age that you were when you first got introduced into political material, where might you send them? What video would you suggest? What book might you send their way?
Damn, dude.
What is the political message that that young person around the age that you were needs to hear so that they end up on the right side of things later in life?
I mean, it's a little cliche, but People's History of the U.S. by Howard Zinn was a pretty good
example.
Starting point for being a really young person and not having much introduction to an alternative perspective and getting it. I would also say just, you know, watch Channel 5 if you want to. We try our best to make good documentaries. So if you're a 13-year-old 8th grader from Seattle, Washington, trying to smoke weed and avoid the notice of your mom, subscribe to Channel 5 because I used to be just like you.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Man. Thanks for having me. This podcast is going to be big. I know it's already kind of big, but this is a dope studio. You're asking all the right questions. Inspiring view, good cameras, great staff, good lighting.